Now let's start our Observables Primer. On this page, we have a list of observable entities, actions, and concepts. And on the right, we have the definitions for each of those items. It's really important that you understand each of these items, and that when we move on to learning the individual RxJS subjects and operators, we will be referring back to many of the items on this list. For example, there are a few RxJS operators which require observable completion. So you really do need to understand what it means when an observable completes. While it would suffice to walk through each of these items and explain in words what each thing means, it would probably be more helpful and more meaningful to you if we took a look at each of these items in code. Let's start at the top of the list with the definition of an observable itself. An observable is simply a method of returning values. A function is also a method of returning values, but whereas a function returns a single value synchronously, an observable is capable of returning 0 to an unlimited number of values, both synchronously and asynchronously. Let's go to the code file for this component and create an observable in code. We'll call the observable $. It's a convention to end the variable name of an observable instance with a $. It's simply a convention, it's not required, and it has no impact on coding the observable, but it does serve as a visual cue that the variable represents an instance of an observable. While there are many ways to create an observable using the RxJS library, for this example, we will use the RxJS Observable Constructor class. If we hover over the observable keyword, we'll see that the constructor takes one parameter, and that parameter is a function called subscribe. The subscribe function takes two parameters, this and subscriber. We don't have to pass the this parameter. It's the instance of the observable we're currently creating, but we do pass the subscriber parameter. Notice that the subscriber parameter is of type subscriber. And if we take a look at the definition of the subscriber class, we'll see that it extends the subscription class. And if we go to the subscription class, we'll see that the subscription class has the unsubscribe method on it. We also see that the subscriber class implements the observer interface. And if we go to the definition of the observer interface, we see that it has 3 callbacks: next, error, and complete. And that's actually the definition of an observer, which is the next item in our list. An observer is an object that contains callbacks for each of the observable notifications: next, error, and complete. Now let's pass into our constructor the subscribe function, and we'll pass in a subscriber object. Now, instead of calling this object subscriber, because it can become, a little confusing between the subscriber parameter and an actual subscriber to the observable. So let's instead call this exactly what it implements, and that's an observer. Just as the definition says, the observer has the next, error, and complete methods. It's important to note that it is the observer which is capable of calling the next error and complete methods, not the observable. If we try to call the next or error or complete methods, we don't see any of those methods on the observable itself. It's only the observer which is capable of calling those methods. If we hover over the observable keyword, once again, we see that the subscribe function is a function that's called when the observable is initially subscribed to. And that gives us the definition of the next item in our list, subscribe. Subscribed is the act of starting an observable's execution and receiving its functions. And that means that any of the code that we put inside the subscribe function will not be executed until we call the subscribe method on the observable. Now let's add some code to the observable's execution. And of course, to have any of this code execute, we need the observable to call the subscribe method. Now, if we hover over the subscribe method, we see that the subscribe method also takes an observer object. It actually takes a partial observer object, which means that we can pass 1, 2, or all 3 of the callbacks. So let's add some code to console log the code that's coming from the observable's execution. So here we have code that console logs the value when the next method is called, to console log the error when the error method is called, and to also console log some information when the complete method is called. Before we take a look at what's been logged to the console, let's first discuss the next 3 items in our list, and that's the next, complete, and error methods. The next method is called by the observer to notify subscribers that a new value is being emitted. The complete method is called to notify subscribers that the observable will no longer pass values, and the error method is called by the observer to notify subscribers that both a problem has occurred with producing values and that the observable will no longer pass any values. I've added lines to the observable's execution to emit the values 1, 2, and 3 synchronously. Let's go to the console to see what's been logged. And we see in the console that the emitted values 1, 2, and 3 have all been received by the subscriber. Remember, the definition of an observable states that the observable can return values both synchronously and asynchronously. In the current code, we are emitting the 3 values synchronously. We can prove this by putting console logs before and after the subscription. Now what we see in the console is we see our before subscribe line, then we see each of the emitted next values, and then we see the after subscribe line. So this shows us that each of the values that were emitted synchronously. To show that an observable can emit values asynchronously, let's emit a 4th value, the number 4, within a set timeout, which will begin 2 seconds after the observable execution begins. And now when we go to the console, We see the before subscribe line, the 3 values, 1, 2, and 3 that are emitted synchronously. We see the after subscribe line, and then we see the emitted value 4, which is emitted asynchronously. With this, we see that indeed an observable can emit 0 to unlimited number of values, both synchronously and asynchronously. Now that we've seen the next method in action, let's take a look at the complete and error methods. Let's first call the complete method, and we'll call that immediately after the third next notification. And the complete method takes no parameters. Let's comment out the set timeout as well as the before and after subscribe consoles. And let's take a look at the console. We see the 3 emitted values as well as the completion notification. And that completion notification, if you remember, comes from the observer object that's passed into the subscribe method. Let's now change the complete method to an error method call. And we see, if we hover over the error keyword, notice the error method takes an optional parameter of any type. So we can pass an actual message via the error method call. Now in the console, we see the 3 emitted values as well as the error notification. And along with the error notification, we see that string that was passed along with the error method call. The next item in our list is the observable contract. The observable contract is a very important concept, and it states that during an observable's execution, 0 to an infinite number of values can be emitted. When an observable completes or errors, no further emissions, completions, or errors can take place. To see the observable contract in action, let's go back to the code and we'll uncomment the set timeout that emits a 4th value after the error method has been called. If we go back to the console, notice we have the 3 emitted values and we have the error notification, but we don't see that 4th value being emitted. We don't see the number 4 being emitted. And that's because the observable contract is being enforced. The 4 is emitted after the error method has been called. Therefore, no further emissions, completions, or errors can take place. So the subscriber does not receive the emitted value 4. To further demonstrate the observable contract, let's go back to the code and change the error method call to a complete method call. Let's remove the error message. And we don't even need the set timeout. So let's remove the set timeout. And what we have now in the observables execution is 3 values being emitted, 1, 2, and 3. Then immediately after that, we have the complete method being called. And immediately after that, we have the next method being called with the value 4. When we go back to the console, we see the first 3 emitted values. We see the completion notification, but we don't see the value 4. Again, that's because of the observable contract. After a completion notification has been sent, no further values, errors, or completions can be sent. And if we go back and change the next call to an error call and pass an error message, we don't see that error message being received after the complete notification. Again, it's the observable contract. Whenever a completion or error notification has been sent, no further notifications of any type can be sent. And that's the observable contract. The next item in our list is unsubscribe. The unsubscribe method is called to terminate the subscriber's receiving notifications, whereas the complete and error methods are the observables way of notifying subscribers that no further values or notifications will take place. The unsubscribe method is the subscriber's way of stating that it no longer wants to receive any notifications. Let's take a look at this in code. If you remember, it's the subscription class which contains the unsubscribe method. And if we hover over the subscribe method, we see that it's a subscribe method that returns a subscription object. So if we set this subscribe to a variable, and we'll call it subscription1 will be of type subscription, and we'll be able to call the unsubscribe method on it. Like so. To make this really interesting, let's wrap the next and complete calls in the observables execution. Let's wrap them in a set timeout that takes place 2 seconds after the execution has started. And let's also wrap the unsubscribe in a set timeout, which takes place 1 second before that. And let's also get rid of this error call. And now when we go to the console, we see the subscriber has received the values 1 and 2, but we don't see the notifications of the value 3 being emitted, nor do we see the completion notification. Why? Because the subscriber unsubscribed 1 second before those 2 notifications were sent. The next notification of the value 3 and the complete notification were sent 1 second after the unsubscribe took place. So the subscriber does not receive those notifications. And if we change the complete method call to an error method call, once again, when we go back to the console, we only see the emitted values 1 and 2. That's because those values are emitted before the unsubscribe, whereas the emitted value 3 and the error notification, they're both emitted after the unsubscribe. And with that, we've demonstrated the unsubscribe action. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. And to stay updated on the latest content from the RxJS workshop, please subscribe to the channel. Do you want to learn more about the RxJS library and many of its features? Please check out my course on the Udemy platform. It's called RxJS Subjects and Operators, What They Do and When to Use Them. You can find the course by clicking on this link on the channel page. Thanks again for tuning in to the RxJS workshop.